So there's the official announcement. Wow, that was startling. Okay, let's see, we're gonna continue. Okay, well, thanks you guys for being here today. My name is Shawna-Lee Perrin. I am kind of a longtime local, lifetime local. I grew up in Swansea, went to school at Keene State College, and actually worked at the Toadstool for, I guess, about a year in the mid-90s. So this is extra special to me to be able to do this today and have them actually being just so wonderful and supporting of my book. So yeah, my novel is called Radio Waves. And I'm sorry if my voice is a little shaky. I'm not used to doing this, so I'm a little nervous. And so what should I tell you about it? Let's see, I guess. All right, so I have my notes here. What I'm going to be doing for a reading today is chapter 2. And let me just show you the cover here. This is Radio Waves, a post-punk novel, and that's my name right there in case you didn't get that just yet. And yeah, so I'll be reading from chapter 2. And so there are just a few things I want to set up for you so that you kind of have an idea of, what you're hearing. So what happened before the chapter that I'm going to read today, you need to know that the narrator is 21-year-old Viv Pierce. She is from a fictional New Hampshire town called Stonewald. And it's not actually based on the hometown that I grew up in. It's just kind of like an angsty teen's views of, what their hometown is like, which is just kind of small, claustrophobic, that kind of thing. But again, it is fictional. So I don't want Swansea getting mad at me because it's not actually based on Swansea. And so Viv is starting the fall semester of her senior year of college in another fictional New Hampshire town. This one is on the seacoast. And she goes to an also fictional university called the University of Coastal New Hampshire, which of course there is no such thing, but it's a lot easier writing a story with a fake, university. Hopefully it feels real. So that's the setting. She's going to be on the coast of New Hampshire in this next chapter. Music is about the most important thing to her, and she's been a DJ at her college's radio station since she started school there 3 years earlier. She's recently engaged to a guy named Adrian, nicknamed Ade. At dinner the previous night, he revealed his vision for a very traditional life after college in Connecticut, and he sees them having kids and Viv being a housewife. When Viv hears this news and how incredibly well planned he has everything, she kind of freaks out. She's feeling overwhelmed. She takes a few minutes to excuse herself to their hotel room, and Adrian finishes up dinner. So she's kind of thinking and just trying to figure out why she's feeling this way. When Adrian returns to the room, he has terrible food poisoning and is very sick. So this chapter happens the next morning once they return to campus. And again, if I didn't already mention it, it takes place in the fall of 1979. So no cell phones, no Zoom, no nothing like that. So without further ado, here is chapter 2 from Radio Waves. Just take a breath here. Okay. When we got, oh yeah, and it's also first person, so just so you know that. When we got to campus in the morning, Ade pulled his Volvo into a parking spot in the lot near my dorm, and I pulled my rust red Pontiac in next to him. I get out of my car, but Ade was bent over his steering wheel, and I could see his back moving up and down with labored breath. I tapped on his window and he jumped, then rolled it down. His skin was pale gray and had a sheen that looked like it smelled of stale bread. His lips were cracked. Jesus, Ade, I said. Move over. I'll get us to the lot behind your dorm and make sure you get upstairs without passing out. His shoulders lurched forward with a body-shuddering dry heave, and he slid over to the passenger side. This is horrible, he said. I've never been this dehydrated. We got to his dorm's small lot, where there were only a couple of cars. Their hazard lights were blinking, and they were parked in no parking zones near a propped open side door. I helped him bring some sheets and blankets, sweats and t-shirts, and his bathroom caddy up to his room, brought him some water, and slipped away once he was settled into bed. I decided to head to the radio station before going back to unpack my stuff. I walked along the campus's main walkway, gazing at its carefully scattered garden beds, glowing with cedar mulch and autumnal mums in shades of orange, yellow, and scarlet. When I got to Kennedy Hall, I was relieved that my key still worked in the back door. I ascended the narrow black and white speckled stairs with fading chrome tread guards, gripping the handrail that had always been curiously sticky, and looked through the small square window in the industrial strength steel door on the second floor. But I didn't see anyone, and all the doors in the long hallway were closed. I swung the door open and walked about halfway down, taking in the walls covered in stickers and posters of records that had come out in previous years. It was always a relief to see that our little museum of punk rock and chaos had gone untouched over the summer. The building's janitor kept threatening to tear it all down and throw it away because it was unsightly and lazy looking. But as far as I was concerned, that hallway was the most perfect art installation in the world. I let myself into the music director's office and thumbed through the nearly toppling stacks of records that had come in over the summer. Each record had to be listened to, summarized on a small rectangular label slapped onto its cover, and screened for profanity before it could go into rotation for airplay. One that had come in was Unknown Pleasures by a band from England named Joy Division. I'd read a little about them in my music magazines and was captivated by the stark, chilly atmosphere of their black and white photos. Music journalists said their live shows were emotionally jarring and described their music as often glum. Being glum myself lately, the record seemed like a good match. I walked down to the listening studio, flicked on the overhead light, closed the oversized heavy door, sat down in the creaky desk chair that was older than I was, and put the record on the turntable. The first lyrics asked if someone else could ever make him feel the things that normal people do. My heart leapt at this unexpected bit of empathy. I plugged in the headphones so I could be closer to these sounds that were unlike anything I'd heard before. The urgency and quickness of the instruments were pure punk, but the sound was far more sophisticated and complex, with the bass right up front. This low-end instrument, typically obscured behind everything else, here instead carried the melody, making every song feel like a catchy funereal dirge. And then there was this voice, seductive and dark and crooning, reaching out with fingers stretched behind a glass barrier, and everything around him echoing, distant, and gaunt. He sang about conquistadors, used metaphors I didn't quite grasp, and referenced characters in old stories I didn't know the names of. But when he sang of love, desolation, and his inability to get beyond that glass barrier, it reached me in a way that drilled down into my marrow. I had every reason in the world to be happy. I wasn't alone anymore. I had the ring. I was supposed to feel triumphant. Unknown Pleasures raged quietly forward. It was a record of questioning, of perpetual discomfort with the savage, normal world. It wound its way into my bloodstream with each rotation of the vinyl disc. The closer I got to the post-college life of actual adulthood, the more terrified I was of it, of tamping everything down, of being a good wife, of giving my body, mind, and soul over to pregnancy and birth, never mind the intense work and lifelong commitment of being an actual mother. As much as I connected to the singer's voice, low as a grave, I knew there were further horrors that awaited me as a woman that even he couldn't understand. Nonetheless, this record was as close as I'd found to how flat and suffocating the trappings of such a life had begun to feel. I hadn't expected to find an oral portrait of what had become my deepest fears and most fervent dreams, but there it was, and the darkness of it all scared me. But it also gave me hope that if they and he could make this flawless, haunting thing out of their depths, that maybe I could make something beautiful out of mine somehow. The week that followed was a long one. I showed up to classes. I showed up to one meal or another. I showed up to Adrian's bed a couple of times when he asked me to, but kept my single solitary room to myself. I got better at making excuses why without making him feel bad or worry. I signed up for a Friday night shift at the radio station, hoping that it would keep my weekends free from travel to places I didn't want to go, like Connecticut. I just need a little bit more time to adjust, I told myself. So that's chapter 2 of, again, here's the cover. what I hope to accomplish there was, even if you don't know the band that I mentioned, hopefully it doesn't really matter, because what I'm hoping to do is just sort of talk about how finding the right band and the right songs at the exact right time, how that can really change a person, and it can just sort of make you feel connected to something bigger, something that maybe you weren't aware of before. So that's what I hope to accomplish with this. And that's about all of the solo chat that I have planned. I hope that that's okay. I don't know if anyone has any questions or anything you'd like me to talk about or explain a little bit better, or.
Yes, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Now, you mentioned Joy Division, great album. Can you talk a little bit more about how music informed your writing process for this book, and what else is on the playlist?
Oh yeah, sure. I actually have, I can put it in the chat, a link to a YouTube playlist that I did for this book. And I can do that in, I guess I can do that right now. So yeah, obviously, yeah, music is pretty important to me. Music and radio in particular. Here in Keene, at the college, we have a college radio station, and I joined up with them when I guess I got my license when I was actually 16, so I was still in high school, and continued doing a shift there, every semester until I graduated in 1994. So up there, I just met all kinds of people that became really important to me. They were kind of like that in that Blind Melon video where the bee girl finds her people. That's kind of what the radio station was for me. And because it was so important to me, it was a huge influence in, the story of this book. I kind of wanted to write about, just how even misfits can find their place even when they're not expecting it. So yeah, music is it's really hard to write about, as I found out. I had several, what's the word I want to use here? Correctly criticized drafts when I was trying to write about how, connection to music happens and how it makes a person feel. And yeah, it was very, very difficult because you can't just say a band and just assume that people are going to know what you're talking about. So it was kind of interesting. I had to go back and listen to the bands that I mentioned with kind of a fresh pair of ears, almost like I was listening to them for the first time, and just try to put into words that little ethereal feeling that you get when you hear just something that strikes a chord within you. So yeah, I really wanted to get that across, and I hope that I do. And again, my hope is that even if you're not familiar with the type of music that I'm talking about here, that readers will still say, oh yeah, I remember when I heard, my favorite band for the first time. It made me feel like maybe I wasn't the only weirdo in the world who was like this, that kind of thing. So yeah. Thanks for asking.
Very cool. Looks like we have a question in the chat. Someone wants to know if you've traveled to London.
I kind of went through London twice in 1992, I was an exchange student and in England just for a semester. So we flew into London. I can't remember if it was Heathrow or it doesn't really matter. But yeah, so I just was in London briefly until I think we caught the train. Where I went to school that semester was a place called Derby. It's in the Midlands. It's like the middle of England. And it's a kind of an industrial type city. And it's definitely not London. So unfortunately, I didn't see much of London, but what I did see, I tried to just sort of build on and just sort of make it like this magical little gleaming city that, small town kids from New Hampshire kind of picture it as. So yeah, I've been to London very briefly. let's see, what was the writing process like for the book, and how long did it take from idea to finished novel? That's a great question, Tim Holsizer. Thanks for asking. So let's see, in 2016, I decided to go back to school to get my Master of Fine Arts in Writing. And so I did it through Southern New Hampshire University. They have a low residency MFA program. And so that takes 2 years. So from 2016 to 2018, I wrote the whole first draft of this novel. So it was, I think, maybe around 70,000 words when I finished. So it was a ton of work. So it was those 2 years of just kind of like really trying to figure out the voice of Viv and the voice of the other characters in the book, and sort of like what her major struggles were to overcome. There were a lot of tears shed, just realizing that I wasn't getting across what I was trying to. But I am so thankful for my MFA program for bringing this out of me. So I graduated in 2018, like I said, with a first draft, had a different title then. And so let me see, from 2018 to 2020, I guess it was, I kept doing revisions of it. I kept, I'd shop entire scenes and then add new ones in, and depending on what people who read it gave me for feedback. So the stuff that was useful was really useful. And so during those 2 years, I was also trying to find a literary agent, sending out query letters. But I think that some of them thought it was too, specific subject matter, music and radio. And I'm not really sure what, but it didn't work out. So I decided last year, 2020, that I was going to do the self-publishing route, because I had a couple of friends who had done that with the company I ended up going through. And so at that time, I decided to hire a developmental editor. And his name is Matthew Sharp. And he's a novelist, and he's really, really funny and really, really good at what he does. So I'd say that working with him and, the sort of like unbiased questioning that he gave me ended up turning the book into, obviously its final version, what you see or what you heard me read from today. So yeah, I guess short answer, it took about 4 years from start to the self-published book that's out there. So yeah, thanks for asking, Tim. I think that answered the question, but if not, let me know. Oh, more to come. Yeah, I'm working on something. I've been working on a new novel for the past year and a half, something like that. But it's not these two characters. It's two sort of Generation X people whose lives turned out completely different than they ever thought that they were going to, and not really in a good way. And so these two people who were best friends in college and then had a falling out, they come back together and try to sort of remember who they were and what was important to them, basically. So that's what I'm working on now. Thanks for asking that. But it's going to be a while. I think it's maybe about halfway done now. So I got to get back to writing for sure. Any current bands you're into and want to recommend? I'm blanking. I've been listening to some this band, very different from the stuff on the playlist there, but it's hard to explain. They're a band from Alabama, and they're this really interesting combination of like punk rock and old time fiddle tunes and Irish music. They're called the Pine Hill Haints, and they are really, really, really great. They've got just so much energy, and they are very do-it-yourself about everything, very independent. So they're really fun. And I should have some others ready to talk about, but I don't. I'm sorry. Yeah. And other than that, I can't really, I'm so embarrassed. I'm blanking on other bands that I'm listening to, but a lot of it's kind of older, older stuff anyway. It's nothing too groundbreaking, unfortunately. I wish I could think of something else pertinent to say, because I know it hasn't been very long chit chat here. But if anyone has any other questions, anything they're curious about, feel free to reach out in the chat here, or I know a couple other people here know how to find me, so you can always ask me later if you want. Yeah.
Mentioned earlier on that you'd worked at Toadstool for a while in the 90s. What was that like?
Oh man, that was, it was funny because, I had always wanted to work there. It was and is just such a cool place. So yeah, at that point, the manager was Jeff Small, who I coincidentally ran into recently. So I told him about this event, so hopefully he'll be able to check that out at some point. It was really, really fun. There are a lot of us who are just recently out of college, very similar, goofy senses of humor. So it was hard because of course unpacking those Ingram boxes and getting all the books out to where they're supposed to be, and that's a ton of work. But yeah, we had a lot of fun, and I think, yeah, I mean, the people that I worked with, I'm still in touch with and consider good friends now. So yeah, I feel very lucky to have worked there. That was when the Toadstool was in the Colony Mill as well. So we had those wooden floors and big old windows, and they were constantly, the roof was like constantly leaking whenever it would rain, which was too bad. But yeah, it's just such a lovely place, and you guys are so good about supporting your local authors and keeping us going. And I don't know, I'm just really glad that we have you around. So thank you.
What inspired you to write this novel specifically? Does some of it come from your own experiences, or do you have particular authors that you kind of were inspired by in the process?
Yeah, I think one of the main things that I really wanted to write about with this novel is just like connection, connecting, between friends, and also kind of realizing that, or just finding the courage within yourself to go and live your life the way that you want to live it, even if it takes you a while to get to that conclusion. I'm kind of, I don't know, I want to inspire people to do what they think is right for themselves and not necessarily what everyone around them is telling them to do. But one of the big inspirations, again, was my radio station experience with the college radio station at Kent State. It was just, there are so many different kinds of people there that I never would have met otherwise. And so there aren't, the characters in here are very, very loosely based on a few people that I knew from back then. But, creative license being what it is, I sort of like really exaggerated things and just blatantly made up most things about, but there are some characters that are based on real people from my time there. And one of them since has actually passed away, and the character that's based on that friend, I think a lot of people who knew him have recognized that in this character. So that's been really neat to see. Let's see, it seems like that was kind of a two-part question, and I don't feel like I got both parts. Writers who were inspiring. My favorite author, contemporary author, is Jennifer Egan. I had never read A Visit from the Goon Squad before I started my MFA program, I'm embarrassed to say. But once I told people the stuff that I was interested in writing about, they said, oh, you have to read this. So I did, and I've, read it several times since. So that's been a really, she's just amazing. She's lovely and just so talented. And I heard she has kind of a supplemental addition to Goon Squad coming out sometime next year. So that's exciting. I definitely am not, anywhere near the level that Jennifer Egan is, but she is definitely a huge inspiration to me. So yeah. Trying to think of anything else I can add. I could look at my bookshelves behind me and sort of see who else is there. Still a lot of books about the punk rock era by like Johnny Rotten and all that kind of fun stuff. So I guess that's my answer.
Awesome. Well, if that's it for questions, I just wanted to thank you so much for being here today. That was really great. We'll make sure to have this video on our website so people who weren't able to make it can check it out after the fact.
Okay, great. Well, thanks
Awesome.
again for having me. I appreciate it. And yeah, have a lovely Sunday.
Absolutely. You too. Thanks everyone for being here.
Thanks, Grace.
Bye-bye.